Good morning, Pantsers. It's Tuesday. I mentioned funerals last week, and Nella requested that I do a video with funeral stories, so that's what I'm going to do, at least a couple of funeral stories. I'm not sure that I have ever been to a funeral that did not have something bizarre happen. Because, you have all this stuff sort of happening to make like a perfect storm of weirdness. Like, a lot of times you have you have a lot of family members all in one small space. Maybe a lot of them haven't seen each other in a really long time. Maybe they only see each other, for like weddings and funerals. And so there is like a lot of family tensions and stuff. There are a lot of people grieving, and there's this very heightened emotional atmosphere. And so, that makes for a lot of weird situations and occasional explosions. And then plus, you just have the fact that everybody's emotions are all weird, and people behave strangely when they're grieving, and they do weird things that they would not normally do. Or they become very, over the top in ways that they would not normally. So, funerals, I think, in general, are often strange. Certainly the ones I have been to are. Most of my, best stories come from one funeral in particular. My friend's mother died, and I was there for all of the stuff. I was there with her early in the day, setting up the viewing and doing stuff like that. It started, first of all, when we got there, and there was going to be, a private viewing for just family members before the actual funeral service. And then there was going to be a closed casket funeral. So they brought in the casket and opened it up for the viewing, and everybody kind of looked at the body and went, she looks weird, because the person who had done her makeup at the mortuary had done a very nice, tasteful job, but she was not a woman who wore nice, tasteful makeup. She wore bright colors, and she wore a lot of it. One of the daughters-in-law and my best friend got out their own makeup and had to fix this woman's makeup in her casket, which, as you can imagine, was very uncomfortable and weird for them. But they both felt that it was really important, because otherwise nobody was going to recognize her, basically. So that was the first moment where we all knew it was going to be a weird day. Skipping over all of the small stuff that happened, just get sort of the highlights, the greatest hits of this particular funeral. The family viewing came around, and this woman's family, her brothers and sisters showed up and everything. She has one sister in particular who was very, she was a character, right? She was very big and very loud and very broad and very, just over the top, even on a good day. And when she was grieving for her sister, she was 50 times louder and, more over the top than you can possibly imagine. And it was very sad, but at the same time you were like, wow, okay, calm, and you were trying to corral her, because she was literally throwing herself at people and stuff. So we got through the private viewing with her, which was very stressful. She was very loud and very, she was throwing herself into the casket, and we got all of that taken care of and dealt with, and got her calmed down and everything. And then the funeral service started. They had closed the casket and everything, people standing up and moving around and talking to each other, and the sister kept going over to the casket and flinging it open and throwing herself into the casket. And then she would grab other people and try to take them to the casket so that they could throw themselves in. She kept doing this over and over again, and she was freaking out other people in the, audience? Do you say audience? Congregation? I don't know what the word would be, but the other people in attendance at the funeral, because they had come to a closed casket service and they were not okay with this sudden, surprise corpse. And she kept doing it. She kept slipping away from people. I mean, we finally had to assign somebody, stay with her, do not let her near the casket. This same woman, by the way, when her sister who had died, when her husband died a few years later, and the family all came up again for his funeral, this same woman interrupted the burial service in order to go into this very loud diatribe about how at the viewing earlier she had kissed the corpse to say goodbye, and then she started, and I mean, she went on for a long time about this, and then she started trying to get over to the casket again to open it, and tried to, like, force family members to kiss this dead body in the middle of the burial service. She finally had to be, like, physically removed from the gravesite and put back into her seat by the person who had been trying to speak. I met this woman on several other occasions, not just at funerals, and she was a very nice woman, but she was very, very unusual. And she had poor impulse control. She was, in fact, a lot like her sister, whose funeral, you know, that I'm talking about here. They were both very big characters and very, like, emotional in a really theatrical way, which sometimes caused problems for the people around them. So, back to the original funeral, the sister's funeral. So, after we got through the funeral part and we, you know, got her to stop flinging the casket open and throwing herself in it, we then nearly gave heart attacks to, like, half the audience because we played James Brown's I Feel Good, which the woman who had died had requested would be played at her funeral, which was fine, except that, as you know, if you've ever heard the song, it opens with a very sudden James Brown scream, and the sound system was turned up very loud, and there was no warning, and it just, everybody thought the funeral was over, and there was like this long period of silence, and then all of a sudden, ah! And there were a lot of elderly people in the audience, so we had a few sort of close moments there. So then we got down to the burial service at the actual gravesite. There's this little slope that goes down one side from the sort of gravel path thing. And her grave was at the bottom of the slope. The problem is that the soil here is all clay soil, right? And if you've never, like, lived somewhere that has clay soil, when it gets wet, it becomes like glass. I mean, it is so slick. And it had been raining a lot. This would not have been a problem except for the fact that they had chosen a cremation casket. Cremation caskets don't have handles because they're just going to go into the crematorium and be burned up. So all the pallbearers are bringing the casket down from the hearse, you know, down to the graveside, and everything is going just fine until they get to the slope and they hit the wet clay soil, and everything goes very wrong. They slid down, like all of them fighting for their footing. There were people sitting in chairs at the graveside. They'd set up like a little sitting area for the people who come to the burial service. And so, and the pallbearers were supposed to bring the casket down in between the rows of chairs. And so when they slid, you know, they kind of careened and they almost took out all of the people sitting there at the burial service. And then they almost ended up, all of them landing sort of head first in a heap with the casket in the grave, which would have been extremely bad. I was so afraid that they were all going to end up, you know, in a pile of like snapped necks and broken bones and splintered wood, you know? I mean, can you imagine the headlines for that? It was a weird funeral from beginning to end. So that was the highlights of that funeral. There were lots of smaller things, but they were overshadowed by the big ones. As I say, a lot of funerals, all the funerals I've ever been to have been weird, but that one was the weirdest. So I guess that's my video for this week. I hope you guys are all having like a great week, and I hope none of you have to go to any funerals, weird or otherwise. DFTBA.